Bellingcat nu, dat is het onderzoekscollectief dat onthulde wie er achter de aanslag zat op MH17. En in hun meer dan 10-jarige bestaan brachten ze veel meer schokkend nieuws. Bellingcat ontdekte dat Assad chemische wapens gebruikte, achterhaalde wie Navalny had vergiftigd. En Eliot Higgins, hier bij mij aan tafel, is de oprichter van Bellingcat. Hij kreeg deze week een eredoctoraat van de Universiteit van Leiden voor zijn baanbrekende werk. Welcome, Mr. Higgins. And congratulations on your doctorate, your honorary doctorate.
Thank you. It's been a great honor.
Yeah. Let's have a look at what you do, because there is a new documentary that is by National Geographic, The Dawning of MH17. It's to be seen at this moment. Here we see what's happening with Bellingcat in relation to MH17. What do we see?
So in the initial hours of the aftermath of the crash, we were trying to piece together exactly what happened to the aircraft, which meant going through image after image of the wreckage and kind of piecing it together as a kind of digital jigsaw. So we can actually understand where the damage to the aircraft is. So what we're able to do is create this kind of almost street view style view of the wreckage of the aircraft.
Because all this is to be found on the internet.
Yeah, just lots of people who are on the ground taking photographs, filming videos, but then putting that all into context so we can actually understand the damage to the aircraft and have the initial clues to what happened to MH17.
Yeah, so do you see yourself more like a journalist or a detective?
I see it primarily as investigative, and then the kind of outcomes of those investigations can be acts of journalism, I guess is one way to do it. But we also work in areas of legal accountability, for example, so that's a very different kind of outcome.
So maybe this is a new kind of journalism, relatively new. In the end, Bellingcat, your organization, even found out who were behind the attack on MH17.
Now we had a treasure trove of information on this man. What we learned was that Dubinsky was an active service, decorated commander, deeply embedded in the command structure of the separatists, and was known at the time to be the head of military intelligence for the separatists. It also became clear who he collaborated with.
That must have been very satisfying.
It was. It was such a long process as well. I mean, this was, I think, about year 4 of our investigation into what happened with MH17. So there were still all these little digital breadcrumbs out there for us to discover, even 4 years after MH17 was shot down. And some of them led to very specific names being named.
Yeah. And so you find the people behind the attack on MH17, and then Putin says, I don't give a damn.
The thing is, for us, we kind of expect that. It's like, I always have the philosophy that all the bad stuff's going to happen, but what difference we make is us being there to investigate, to analyse, to try and find accountability for what happened. So Putin can stand up and say we didn't do it, but the evidence is very clear, it's available, and any member of the public can go through that evidence.
So for you, it's more important that you found this out, and what happens next, that's not in your hands.
It can be to a certain extent. It's really, for us, we want to see accountability for these things. And there was an accountability process in place for MH17 through the legal processes in the Netherlands and elsewhere.
Yeah. In this documentary, Mark Rutte is also present, has been interviewed. He was, of course, at that time our Prime Minister. And he was then talking to Putin on a daily basis.
I was on the phone every day with him. I tried to keep it as neutral as possible. And please, could he help? And he making clear to me, yes, but Mark, it's not Russia involved in Donbass and Luhansk in the eastern part of Ukraine. And yes, I know, I understand that, I accept that for this moment, but Vladimir, you have more influence on the people there than I have. For that moment, the first priority was get our people back. And of course, also establishing the cause of the crash. And you realize that will be very difficult.
Mr. Rutte, in English, because of our guest, of course, I think this was a decisive moment in your time as Prime Minister, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Because I really realized, I was 4 years in my role as Prime Minister, that the geopolitical situation had shifted dramatically, and that as Netherlands we really had to navigate that crisis and couldn't be naive anymore.
No. And how crucial has Bellingcat been in this research?
I think very crucial. First of all, because you guys were able to establish the facts, really fast, you could argue. Of course, there was, and secondly, it was also motivating everybody to keep on working and finding out what happened. There was one problem, and it is, of course, that the next of kin were telling us, okay, if Bellingcat now knows what happened, why does it take so long for the legal procedures? And then I had to explain that, of course, in a court case, you need all the evidence there. You need to move beyond reasonable doubt. In the end, of course, what came out was not far from what you had found out in the beginning.
No. So it's now more than 10 years ago, MH17, the downing of the plane. Will justice be done?
I'm convinced it will. So in November 22, the court ruled lifelong sentences on the main suspects. I think that was an important moment. Of course, they're still not yet in jail, as far as I know of. But we have seen with Lockerbie and other disasters and attacks that it can take years and years. But the ones with the capability to stay the course, to keep the focus on the case, they will win. And that's absolutely what we, the Dutch, but also all the other grieving nations will do, no doubt.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Higgins, so in fact, searching for the truth on the internet, that's what you do. And what we can all do, because we all have smartphones and we all have a laptop.
Yeah, and we've really gone through an information revolution over the last 15 years, really with the launch of the iPhone in 2007, creating this revolution of smartphone technology, which meant more apps, which meant more social media, which meant people are more connected together than ever before. And there's very clearly bad sides to that, and we're seeing that, I think, especially in America, the bad side of that happening every single day. But at the same time, through the work we've done at Bellingcat, we have investigated with a global community a whole range of different topics, had real impact. And I think that's something that we really want to take to the rest of the world, get more people involved with this kind of investigation.
Yeah. Using the smartphone, using the laptop, the computer. But at the same time, these devices feed us with fake information.
It's, for me, a huge opportunity in terms of what we're able to do with this kind of information. But in a sense, we haven't adapted as a society, as democracies, to this new world. That I think we're still stuck in the old mindset that we have this kind of top-down, gatekeeped information model through traditional media, the government. But that's changed. People are getting information on a peer-to-peer basis, not just as recipients of information, but participants in its spread and creation.
Yes.
And we need to educate people around that so that they do it in a way that's healthy for democracy. Because at the moment, what people are doing are trying to pursue the algorithm to get the right combination of words, of phrases, of music to get in the algorithm. And that doesn't encourage the truth, that just encourages people to chase whatever is the most emotionally engaging. Yeah. And I think that's really, really dangerous to society as a whole, and we're seeing that more and more.
So their education is necessary, you say? Big tech is taking over in the US. You already mentioned it, under the new Trump administration. And many say democracy is in jeopardy now there, and autocracy is being made there. People are deeply worried. Are you too?
Absolutely. If you look over at the US, I think we're seeing the death of American exceptionalism, that this idea that, you know, America's a beacon of democracy is just falling flat. The beacon seems to be made out of paper, and it's on fire at the moment, because if you look at what's happening with the government, it just seems like the law doesn't matter, that you can just walk into a government department and shut it down outside of any legal process, and that in the reality, no one's going to stop you doing that if you have people in the right position in the government, in the court. And if you have a media that, I think, to be honest, is being just bent over completely to what's happening in the US at the moment.
And so what's the answer, in light of your open source information?
I mean, there's no short-term solution to this, but I think what's really important is that we have to look at the fundamentals of why people are being drawn to these more extreme beliefs, why people are drawn into conspiracy theories. And so often our approach in the past has been focused on outside actors, usually Russia, putting out disinformation, confusing people and making them believe stuff that isn't true. But I think that's nonsense. Fundamentally, this is about a lack of trust in traditional sources of authority. That trust then being compounded by some form of crisis, be it political, social, global pandemic, and then having those online spaces where you already have communities who have that same sense of distrust and reinforce that sense of distrust. And alongside that, algorithmically selected content is about engaging you emotionally rather than trying to find the truth. And that combined is leading us to a society which is increasingly splintered, increasingly radical in terms of its view, but also completely disempowered because it has no way to connect to the political establishment. And what we're trying to do at Bellingcat is examine that problem and say, how do you actually deal with that?
Yes, and then you at Bellingcat, but also we as citizens, we can search for the authentic truth, shall we say. But how do you hold authoritarian regimes responsible for this truth? I mean,
I think sometimes we actually over-focus a bit on authoritarian regimes and don't worry about our own governments and how they operate. We're so worried about thinking about problems in places like Russia and the terrible things that are happening there, we're kind of overlooking that democracy is in crisis in the West to an extreme extent, and that we aren't really adapting our society to deal with that reality. I think what's really important now is that we are more connected, we are more involved, and we have to live with that reality by figuring out how we actually empower citizens to have an impact on the world around them in a positive way. And I think we often overlook that in Western democracies because we kind of feel we've won the argument and that democracy is going to be okay. And that really, if we look over to the...
No, but I think looking at the United States, that's what people say at this moment. That's where democracy is in danger at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's frightening that that could easily happen in Europe.
Yeah.
And it just takes the right combination of politicians, the right political movement, and we could have our own Donald Trump in Europe. And then where are we going to be as a European Union?
And then what we do. I mean, you talk about education. People should be able to use the internet in a way that helps them. But if you know the truth, if you found out the truth, and you don't dare to speak up to say the truth, then all hope is lost, I guess.
Absolutely. You've got to stand up and you've got to be able to speak the truth. But you've also... The problem we have nowadays is everyone has their own version of the truth, and they will find communities online that will tell them that they're right and reinforce that. And the question is then, what does the truth matter if everyone has their own version of the truth? And that everyone's mad about everyone else on the internet not having the correct version of the truth. For me, it's actually about thinking, what institutions do we have, and how do we connect them to the people? We are working at the moment at Bellingcat. We go into universities, we develop course material to teach open source techniques, and then we create hubs where students can come together and apply those techniques to actual investigations. So we've just done one with Utrecht University, and their first investigation was using open source material to look at police violence during pro-Palestinian protests. And that was something that got national media coverage, it made the police ask questions, and it's looking for those opportunities to bring people together into environments where we're not just teaching them that the truth is important, because that seems obvious to everyone, I think, but how to find the truth and actually how to have impact from that truth. That's crucial.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about your life. Your work is very rewarding, but also very dangerous. In your daily life, are you constantly aware of this?
I have what I would call an underlying awareness of those issues, because we do face all kinds of issues at Bellingcat. I mean, there's certainly cybersecurity threats, for example. I mean, there's state-level actors who focus on us as well.
Yeah.
But we also have communities who, believe that, we're, working for the lizard people or whatever that may be, and they also pose their own kind of threat to our organisation. So,
what do you notice in daily life?
It's more that I'm just a bit more hyper-aware of kind of any oddness that's happening on the kind of streets around me, or I'm kind of heightened to that kind of thing.
But I also read that there is a team of 6 Bulgarians constantly on your tail.
There was. They got arrested, fortunately, and they're currently on trial in the UK. So I'm limited on what I can say about that. But that's another example of, how we're targeted, and it's also a reflection of the shift in Russian tactics, where they're now using kind of Europeans to act as proxy spies for their intelligence services. So, yeah, that case is just one example of that.
So danger is everywhere. Do you drink the water in your glass?
Well, I'm assuming you're not all going to poison me today, but it is something I have to be careful about. If I'm staying in a hotel, for example, I won't have room service because I just haven't seen where that food's coming from, and that it's something that can be tracked in terms of where I could be staying if you have the right information, the right data. So there's that kind of caution you have to have on a regular basis. But I live my life. I mean, I'm not scared to go out the door or anything like that.
I'm happy to hear that. But don't you worry about your family, for instance?
I worry, but then I manage that worry by managing risk. So that's, there's only so much you can do to protect yourself. If a van draws up and, 4 big Russian guys jump out and grab me, I'm not going to kung fu my way out of it. So I just have to live with those risks.
Okay, I wish you a very safe life and safe career. And thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Eliot Higgins, het tweede deel van deze serie, Who Downed MH17, is aanstaande donderdag te zien om 20:30 bij National Geographic. Bedankt voor het kijken. En vond je dit een goed gesprek? Vergeet je dan niet te abonneren. Een like of een comment achterlaten kan natuurlijk ook. Oh ja, had je dit al gehoord?
Moet je je realiseren dat over 4, 5 jaar onze afschrikking niet voldoende is als we op deze manier doorgaan. Dan moeten we nu maatregelen nemen.